So, okay. So welcome back to the Toronto afternoon session of this conference. This afternoon we shall listen 4 talks, and the first one is by Emile Poulain from Yeshiva University, and the title is what you see on the screen, and it's in words, it's Pushing Cycle Cocycles over Sobolev Domains and Extraordinary Consequences for Material Science. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And first of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak to this distinguished forum. Here is you just heard the title of my talk, and here is the title of our workshop, which should be about achievements and future prospects. And after sending the title and abstract, I realized that the story I put forward was mostly about the past. So then what to do? I found a way to sneak in something about present, and then it will be very clear what the future prospect will look for me. In this part of my talk, where I will tell the context where these applications of cyclic homology will happen, and I will enlarge this context to many-body picture by following this recent work with Bram Mestland, and this work is now available from the archive. The setting is that of a lattice of quantum resonators, and a typical example would be just atoms, but these days the options are many. These resonators can be quantum circuits, artificial atoms, such quantum dots, or just cold atoms. So the setting covers a broad range, and I imagine fermions hopping or populating this lattice of resonators, and then the algebra of local observables is just the AF algebra generated by the anti-commutation relations. Just a few specifics. This lattice will always be infinite. The interest will be in translational non-symmetric case. And in fact, the lattice will be a Delaunay set with this parameter fixed so that resonators don't come too close to each other, and the holes which might develop, they are bounded in size. Now there will be a twist right from the beginning. And to explain the twist, look how one generates words from the CR algebra. And basically you need a set of indices, therefore a compact subset of the lattice, an order of these indices, and then you can generate a word in this safe manner. And if you let this lattice float inside the Delaunay space, then you actually need a triple. You need the lattice, a compact subset, and an ordering. And if you have this data, then you generate again a word from the CAR algebra. And the first observation we made was that this data can be topologized such that it becomes a cover of the Delaunay space. And in fact, this observation has far-reaching consequences. Now there is such a cover for each such n. We call them many-body covers. They are very nice. We can permute these indices, and if we do so, then we obtain left and right actions by the permutation group, and also RD acts by homeomorphism on this cover. We simply rigidly shift the lattice, we take V with it, and compose this chi of V with a shift, and we get a homeomorphism. And you might say there is a problem here because two such data may lead to the same word, but it's not a problem at all, because an element from the CAR can be uniquely presented in this way, provided these C-valued coefficients obey this bi-equivariant constraint, where here you see these left and right actions of the symmetric group. However, the interest is not in this CRR algebra, but rather in the dynamics of local observables, therefore on flows over this AF algebra. And the challenge is, of course, that these flows are by outer automorphisms. And what was our plan? The plan was to consider a core algebra of well-behaved Hamiltonians, which covers, in fact, all physically sound Hamiltonians, which can be mapped out by an experimenter, and then try to complete this algebra to a topological algebra. Hopefully, a sister algebra will show up along the way, so we can start a cyclic homology machinery. Now, here is the set of these well-behaved Hamiltonians. They are Galilean invariant, gauge invariant, and have finite interaction range. Now, Hamiltonian is never about one lattice. If you place Hamiltonian fermions over a lattice, then you can deform that lattice and they will interact again. So Hamiltonian should be a whole correspondence from the space of the lowest sets to, we would like to inner limit derivations, but we will start with this formal series. And we would like to this correspondence to be continuous in this L. And we can nicely say what this continuity is, because we have this cover, these many-body covers, and we'll simply require that these C-valued coefficients to be globally and continuously defined over the n-body covers. And then these HNs must obey these constraints. They must be bi-equivariant with respect to the permutation group of permutation. They must be equivariant with respect to the RD action. And this condition here enforces this finite interaction range. And we would like this to be self-conjugate. And of course, this is a very well-behaved set. Indeed, this formal series, they lead to an inner limit derivation. This inner limit derivation have a common domain, dense common domain. They leave this domain invariant, so on and so forth. Now, because the domain is left invariant, I can compose these derivations, I can add them up, and I can then define a subalgebra of the linear maps over this common domain. And this will be the algebra we are interested in. So they are generated by derivations coming from such formal series. And the important input here is that this C-valued coefficients satisfy the conditions the constraints I put in the previous slide. An alternative way to look at this subalgebra is to realize that the linear space generated by this elementary derivation, in fact, is closed against this Lie bracket. If you take this Lie bracket, then you'll find that it's a linear combination of derivation coming from such formal sums with these Qs obeying the relation. So that's highly non-trivial. And then this algebra is just the associated envelope of this Lie algebra. If you want to understand the dynamics of fermions over the Delaunay set L, then this is the algebra you have to deal with. And I'll have a punchline for in a few slides. But now I will shift the gear and tell you about a canonical groupoid that can be associated to any Delaunay set. And first, two notions from generic theory of patterns. If you have a fixed lattice L0, then the continuous whole of this pattern is a topological dynamical system where the space is just the closure of all possible translates of the pattern. And this dynamical system accepts abstract transversals. In particular, it accepts a canonical transversal, which is just all the lattices which contain the origin of the physical space. And from these two notions, you can associate this groupoid. As a set is just these tuples. It's a lattice from the transversal and the point from RD. And the constraint is that this point actually lands on this lattice L. Then this is embedded naturally in a transversal times RD. Therefore, we have a topology for G1, also an inversion map. Here is the subset of composable elements and the composition rule. And the observation by Jean and Johannes is that this groupoid is étale, therefore has a separable C-star algebra, and the left regular representations of this C-star algebra generates all Galilean invariant Hamiltonians for the dynamics of one fermion. So every result or paper that was written about, for example, topological insulators, aperiodic topological insulator is based on this result. So if this C-star algebra of Galilean invariant Hamiltonians would have been non-separable, then nothing would have worked. So this is a fundamental result in our field. And so far, everything was built on this result. And the goal of our recent work was to expand this to the many fermion, setting. And we were able to do that without struggling, because we were able to use ideas which were already floating in the literature. For example, in Dana Williams' new book, you will find this concept of blowing up the space of units. If you have a topological groupoid and a function from topological space Z to the space of units, which is continuous and open, then you can generate canonically a new groupoid, which rightfully can be called the blown up groupoid by F. And sure enough, the space of units of Pelizar-Kellendon groupoid accepts a blow up, and the blow up is precisely by these many body covers I already mentioned. So we don't get any blow up. In fact, this map F here is a local homeomorphism. So we immediately get a blow up groupoid, which can be nicely characterized, and it makes a lot of physical sense. In fact, if you look at the groupoid C-star algebra of this groupoid, it comes very close to the Hamiltonians I put down a few pages before, except that we still need to address this by equivariant property of the coefficients. And for that, we zoom into this group of bisections, which exists for any topological groupoid. And this group of bisections, in fact, has by default continuous commuting left and right actions on the groupoid itself. So this whole structure, in fact, comes with any topological groupoid. And if you have a group, you can hook this group to the groupoid by a homomorphism from the group to the group of bisections. By doing so, you get this for free. You get left and right actions of this group on the groupoid, and we call this one a two action of H. And next, sure enough, I'll tell you that for these blown up groupoids, the space of the group of permutation has a natural two action. And here are the commuting left and right actions spelled out. They involve the deck transformations of the cover, but also the translation. So overall, this is a highly non-trivial two action, but it turns out it's precisely the two action that is needed to deal with the equivariant property of the coefficients. And now I'm gearing towards what we call bi-equivariant groupoid C-star algebra. And for that, we need the notion of two action of a group on an algebra. And after some back and forth, we decided, we converged to this definition here. It's just a homomorphism from the group to the unitary group of the multiplier algebra. It generates again commuting left and right action of H on the algebra. And now if we have a two action of a group H on the groupoid, a two action of the same group on the algebra, then if we look at the groupoid C-star algebra with values in this algebra A, then we can project to a subalgebra by looking only at the elements which satisfy this bi-equivariant constraint. And we call this subalgebra the bi-equivariant groupoid C-star algebra relative to this group H. So now I have all the elements in place, and I can tell you the context. That is, I can name the C-star algebra, which this cyclic cohomology application should happen. And here it is. And I'll use this slide to summarize what we did. We started from well-known Belisard-Kellendon groupoid for one fermion. We use a natural blow-up by this many-body covers. We got to this N groupoid. We found that there is a natural two action by the symmetric group, so we projected to this bi-equivariant algebra. If we extend to the multiplier algebra and we take a left regular representation, what we found that this is the C-star closure of the image of that beast algebra that we put at the beginning through the Fock representation. So in other words, we know precisely what is the context here. And furthermore, over here, if we look at the full algebra itself, then this side here will be the topological closure of this algebra, which comes in the form of a pro-C-star algebra. There are many things to be said here. I only say that this extension to the multiplier algebra is unavoidable, and it might raise questions because then we pass from a separable C-star algebra, we pass back to a non-separable algebra. However, it doesn't bother us at all because we know that Hamiltonians generated from the groupoid algebra supply a dynamics in which the n fermions evolve together in one cluster, while if we generate Hamiltonians from the corona, then the fermions break in many clusters, and the interest is almost always in this case, except if you will be talking about collisions of molecules and so on. So let me just pause and say that all this construction exists once a Delaunay set L0 is given. So nothing artificial has been used, everything has been intrinsically and canonically built up. Furthermore, this groupoid C-star algebra accepts an action by RT. The origin of this action is really in this gauge freedom of the anti-commutation relations of the Sierre algebra. Basically, if you redefine the generators by such a phase factor, then commutation relations are preserved. So this leads to a full automorphism, and we have an action of RD on the CAR algebra. And this action trickles down to inner limit derivations, therefore on the groupoids. And if you look what this action looks like, it's of this form. So I recall that this psi is a triple, it's the lattice, a subset, and an ordering. So what we see here is the center of mass of that subset, and n, the number of fermions shows up in front. And certainly this action by RD is intrinsically related to electric charge and transport coefficients. And to build cyclic cycles, then I need also a trace. And if the continuous hole comes equipped with a ergodic measure, then this ergodic measure drops to the space of units of the G1. And therefore, we can equip the groupoid C-star algebra with a trace. And this trace has physical content because it's just the trace per volume for the represented algebra. Furthermore, the trace commutes with the RD action. So at this point, we have all the elements to generate standard cocycles. Unfortunately, for GN, things don't look so clearly. You can promote this measure to a pullback measure on the cover. However, this will generate a semi-finite trace. It commutes with is invariant. I mean, the trace is invariant with respect to the RD action. However, there are so many options, and we still need to sort out which kind of pullback is the physical one, and also what is the correct normalization, because this being a semi-finite trace, we don't have a standard normalization for it. So from this point, I will retrieve to the safe case of n = 1, where a lot of work has been done because the Melizar-Kellendon groupoid has been around for 30 years now. And for example, if you take a subset of indices, then this will be the standard cyclic cycle. We know that there is pairings with the K0 or K1 classes, which land in a countable subgroup of the real axis. Furthermore, these pairings have a physical content. If this J contains only 2 indices, then the pairing gives you the whole conductance. And if the J is an arbitrary J of cardinal, even cardinal, then what you obtain, the pairing gives a nonlinear transport coefficient, shown here, where this V is the magnetic field. And similar things can be said for the odd pairings, but they are more involved, so I need to, I'll skip that point. And next, I'll want to show you a few examples. They are related to this quantization of the pairing, but in fact, these examples are intended not to exemplify this well-known quantization, but rather to learn something new about these pairings. But the first example is this Hamiltonian. It's originally generated on a honeycomb lattice, and whenever there are sites, first nearest neighboring sites, like over here, I place a term like this, and whenever we have sites which are second neighboring, like over here, I'll put a term like so, and then we imagine that this lattice has been perturbed by moving the points randomly, and then a random potential is included. And if you ask, okay, where is this Hamiltonian coming from? Well, for sure is associated with this cross product algebra. And this cross product algebra has a top, a K0 theory, and a top generator. And then you can form this Hermitian operator, which has spectrum at 1 plus 1 and -1. It has a gap. And then you can try to restrict the range, I mean, the support of this p-top to a compact support, and you try to squeeze it as much as possible. And without this term, it turns out that this one can be, in fact, squeezed all the way to this Hamiltonian. And as a rule, all the models of topological insulators in condensed matter, they are obtained in this way. And if you don't know K-theory, then you will discover these Hamiltonians once at a time. If you know K-theory, then you'll discover all interesting model at once. That might be a good or not so good thing, because you solve things too quickly and you might be out of job. Nevertheless, what I will do next, I will feed in the spectral projections to the co-cycle, and I will sample with this E, I will sample the real axis. And here are the results. The results are for increasing simulating boxes, and we do see quantization here at 0, quantization at 1, a transition. Now, what is this fuzzy stuff over here? The omega has been generated again and again randomly, and the calculation was repeated about 100 times, and that's what these fluctuations come in here. The red line is the average, and of course, as the simulation box becomes larger, the quantization gets better. For example, over here, the quantization is almost with 12 digits of precision. There is no question that we do achieve quantization. And the interesting fact is that these fluctuations don't go away. So what are they? And it will turn out that they are related with something very interesting. And you'll say at this point that everything makes sense. It's in line with this quantization of the pairing, except that this calculation has been done for this example where there is no spectral gap whatsoever. So what I'm showing here is the spectrum of that Hamiltonian repeated for many values of omega, and with the disorder strength increasing in this way. So at the low disorder strength, we do have a gap. So here is where the quantization of the pairing is expected. But in fact, that quantization that you see over here extends all the way between these points shown. Even here, the quantization goes well beyond of the standard. And in fact, if you look where this shift between the quantized value happen, well, there is a critical manifold where this abrupt change in quantized value happen. And numerically, you can check and see what is the spatial profile of the wave function. And you will see that everywhere else in this phase diagram, the eigenvectors are localized, in fact, exponentially localized around some center. And exactly around this diagram, along this manifold, the eigenvectors, in fact, are delocalized in the sense that they are no longer in L2 of the lattice. The existence of this critical manifold, in fact, it's quite spectacular. It happens at humongous values of disorder. And if you look at the experimental work on this type of system, they don't care, of course, about this featureless inside or outside. Everything's focused on the phase transition. I'll use one more example to where things, in fact, can be computed more analytic. I'll take a dynamical system and two functions, T and M, and I will cook up a model in this way. This model really comes again from that K-theoretic argument that I said, and the model has a key symmetry. When you conjugate with this Pauli matrix, the Hamiltonian becomes minus Hamiltonian, so the spectrum is symmetric relative to 0. And this symmetry will be called chiral. And I am going to solve the Schrödinger equation at energy equals 0. And because the equations are so simple, the Lyapunov exponent can be calculated explicitly. In fact, this is a very rare case when this Lyapunov exponent can be calculated explicitly, and certainly it's the only case where you can observe analytically a localization-delocalization phase transition. For example, if you take omega to be the white noise and T and M Diels function of this type, so they have a non-fluctuating part and a fluctuating part, the strength of the fluctuating parts are quantified by this W and W2, then you can calculate the Lyapunov exponent and you'll find that it is 0 on an entire manifold. So the question is, why is this manifold over there at these humongous values of this order? In fact, this manifold extend this way infinitely. And it is this, the spectacular phenomenon is the emergence of this manifold. It's not quantization or topological invariance. What really matters in a laboratory is this manifold here. And then if you look at the phase of the Hamiltonian, then it's just an off-diagonal matrix with a unitary element as an entry, and we can look at this pairing. And if you look at the pairing, then you see that the pairing take quantized value all the way to this critical manifold shown here with this black line. So this example seems to infer that whenever you have a change, seems to infer two things, that the pairing, the quantization of the pairing happens well beyond the traditional setting. So you can be sure that over here there is no spectral gap left in the system. Therefore, this U is no longer in the C-star algebra. And second, it appears to infer that whenever you have a abrupt change in this quantized value, you must have this manifold of delocalized states. And if that's the case, then it's an extraordinary fact, because then you know you have a mechanism to generate these awesome manifolds these awesome critical manifolds. And I could go on with many examples. We've done a lot of numerical experiments to witness this localization-delocalization transition. And in fact, this conjecture topological classification table is built precisely on this physical principle. So it doesn't have a mathematical principle behind. It's really this principle. So you, in all these phases and listed here, you can witness this localization and delocalization phase transition. Everything else which doesn't show this localization delocalization transition is trivial from the point of the experimentalist. And you can see that this is not K-theory here, because these groups are so simple and so on. I should stress that this table up to here was generated in 2008 by these people, and many in the mathematics community attributes this table to Kitaev. So then I'm coming to the third part of my talk, which is really pushing the co-cycle pairings on Sobolev domains and explaining why this manifold emerges. And to date, the proof of these relations between quantized value of these pairings and emergence of these critical manifolds follows the model from this paper by Velizard, Van Els, and Schulz-Waldes in 1994. It's really the model, and here I listed a number of papers which deal precisely with pushing this thing into the Sobolev. These works deal with cross-product algebras, and this work is for generic patterns, therefore in the full groupoid picture. Today I'll stay in the groupoid context, therefore arbitrary lattices, and but I will use the tools developed here because they are very elementary. Over here we use the machinery of the semi-finite spectral triples and so on. But my goal is to just supply a very elementary analysis and also to tell you a connection with Alain's 1985 paper. Good, so if in a standard approach, the domain of those co-cycles will be the smooth subalgebra. However, if a simple Holder inequality applications will tell you the following, that the co-cycles are bounded by something like this. It involves LP norms and the derivations. And then if you try to probe the continuity of the co-cycles, then you find that, for example, this this difference, in fact, can be bounded by something like this times a factor. So continuity will follow just by using these semi-norms. You don't need a L infinity norm. And this, in fact, it's quite important because if you look at the spectral projections that I used before, they will be never continuous in this L infinity norm, but they will be continuous in this semi-norm as one varies the energy E. And of course, this property here comes from the cyclic property of these multilinear maps. So all these Fs are on equal footing here, and this for sure is projected explicitly on this in this right-hand side. So the reasonable conclusion will be that the natural domain of these co-cycles is the Sobolev space with this norm, and certainly all the spectral projections and the use where this quantized quantization of the pairing was observed, they do belong to this Sobolev space. In fact, this Sobolev norm, especially here, it's a localization condition on these functions. For example, if I replace this function by the spectral projection, then whenever this Sobolev form is finite, then this localization length, which describes the localized character of the wave functions, is finite. And certainly, if this Sobolev norm blows up, then the same will happen to the localization length. So this Sobolev norm definitely has a physical content. And what I will do next, I will take the Dirac operator from RD and push it through the RD action on our C-star algebra, and you automatically get a canonical Fredholm module. And one important aspect here is that at the beginning we use this X naught here to shift the spectrum so that the origin is not part of the spectrum, so we can divide over here. But in fact, it turned out that inclusion of this X naught is of crucial importance. How about summability? Well, you can take this commutator. So these are left regular representation of the coming from the left representations of the groupoid, you take this commutator, raise it to power d, and you can calculate the Dixmuir trace, and it comes to this explicit expression. And sure enough, the right-hand side is bounded as long as this F is taken from the Sobolev algebra, the Sobolev space. I think I call it Sobolev algebra, but Sobolev space. So therefore, because this one is a positive operator, you will conclude immediately that the commutator here is in the d plus epsilon Schatten space. So immediately the Kohn-Chern character comes into play, and you have this equality P almost surely. So then the local index formula is about computing the Kohn-Chern character. And first, let me put a statement, and then I'll show the elementary proof. So if you take a P from a projection from the Sobolev space, then P almost surely, this fellow is a Fredholm operator. You have this equality. So the index of this Fredholm operator is nothing but the pairing, which we analyzed before. And now furthermore, if you take a full family of projections from this Sobolev space, and this varies continuously with respect to this semi-norm, then this pairing, it stays constant, and also it's quantized. So let me maybe one word about this index theorem. A typical index theorem over C infinite, I mean, infinite smooth subalgebra, you will have quantization and continuity from the entirely from the left-hand side, and the right-hand side will give you a way to calculate the index. However, in this index theorem, the left-hand side only gives you the range. By no means you can calculate, you can demonstrate that this is continuous under such deformations, and it is the right-hand side which gives you the continuity. So in some sense, it's an index theorem pushed all the way to the to its limits. And now here is the elementary proof. First, you look what happens when you change L, when you shift L, and you will find that such a shift produces a compact operator. Now, what happens when I change this X naught? Well, you produce again a compact operator. So then this equality, you can average over L and this X naught, because all these are P almost surely. And now, in fact, this you can calculate this average. So everything here is absolutely convergence. You expand this super trace, and you in a few steps you get to this expression. And over here you see this monster. And sure enough, if you can say a word about this monster, you are done with the proof. And I'll go back to Alain's fantastic paper. And for me, the part of this paper which really had a huge effect on my research and my life, I could say, is here in chapter 9, where he analyzes the Fredholm module of convolution algebras and the case G equal R2, where you see this lemma 2. And Alain proves here this identity. I'm not sure if he remembers the proof, but the identity is really geometrical. So this is why the title of this slide. One has to deal with three triangles and with this, the sum of the order areas of those triangles. And if you stare enough at this proof, as I did, you realize that if you complete those triangles to a sector of a disk, then those three areas add up to a full disk, and the proof becomes elementary, and you can expand the triangles to these circle sectors because of a symmetry argument, which tells you that it will make no difference. But now, if you see this, another geometric view of the proof, then you can go in higher dimensions. So in higher dimensions, triangles become simplices. You have to deal with the volume of these simplices, and you complete these simplices to solid angles. Solid angles then become a full solid angle. The proof can be repeated, and here is what you get. So you get that exactly this monster that came up in this expansion now is can be evaluated to something so simple. And sure enough, once you have this geometric identity, the proof is done. So this was the last slide of my talk. So let me recap. All I did was really to go over the NCG arrow. I'll put here how that might look for a material scientist. So you start with the algebra of local observables. I really believe this should be an AF algebra, and now we are trying to see in lab how we do start with an AF algebra. You have to compute the star algebra of inner derivations, equivariant under physical groups, physical group actions, and next step you like to compute the K-theories, which gives you a global picture of the interesting models, and it is at this level where you communicate with the engineers, and in the background you see all these examples which really came from this square. And the next step will be compute the cyclic homology and generate pairings, and very often these pairings have physical interpretation. Quantized calculus then generate pairings with quantized range. Very important is to make the last push into the Sobolev, where dynamical statements can be made. So already at this level of K-theory, certain spectral statements can be made, but really the crown prize is these dynamical statements and the existence of these critical manifolds. And now about the future with these many-body groupoids, where are we? Well, we are just right here. So we are about to go up the NCG arrow, and it is quite interesting. So these n-body groupoids are blown-ups of the single fermion groupoids, so therefore they are all Morita equivalent. However, this, when you project to the bi-equivariant algebra, that's no longer the case. So now we are rushing to develop tools to calculate the K-theory of these bi-equivariant groupoids. I already told you that, okay, I got in some nagging problems about generating cyclic co-cycles. And yes, there is work to be done, and certainly that's what I will do for the next few years. So I'll stop here and thank everybody for the patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you.